Hey there, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to our session. My name is Jared Marino with Microsoft Surface team, and we're very grateful you've taken the time to join us in this session, also co-hosted with our good friends at NAFCorp. But before we get started and dive into all there is to know about our Surface devices and zero-touch deployment, Windows Autopilot, and all sorts of other fun things, I want to acquaint you with the platform that we're using today. There are a number of different ways that you can participate with us, and the first is by chatting. Over on this side of the
and are currently managed through Endpoint Configuration Manager, but the device is actually with the user remotely at their home location, home office, we will still be able to leverage the autopilot task sequence template and provision the device to autopilot moving forward. With that being said, I would like to hand off to Rigel to proceed with the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Priya. Yeah, so a lot of that is really good information that I'll be covering more in detail with my portion. So what we have up here is kind of the basic workflow for autopilot. And I kind of wanted to start with this because for those of you who are familiar, this might be a slide or picture that you've already seen. But for those of you who are not familiar, I'll kind of go through how autopilot works generally. The main goal, or one of the biggest goals here for autopilot, is the ability to hand a device directly to a user, with very minimal or no IT admin interference in between, but then still be sure that all the apps, policies, and security settings are on the device, just like a fully deployed device that you would provision today. And the way you would do that kind of starts at the hardware vendor itself. Now, Jared and we prefer, Surface devices here, but any Win 10 device is really possible. So, if you're going with your HPs or Dells, whatever it is in your organization, it is possible to autopilot. So the two big scenarios here kind of start with either brand new devices that you get directly from your hardware vendor, or existing devices in your organization. It's very nice to be able to repurpose devices, so autopilot does let you do that. Where you would start with these devices is trying to get that basic information, and as you can see here, it's talking about device IDs. That, in conjunction with the serial number, needs to be essentially harvested from the device. So if you purchase the device, you can request that information from the hardware vendor during the time of purchase. But with existing devices, you would need to harvest that information. And you can do so using a basic script that's available. Once you get that information, you can go ahead and upload it to the portal online, which I will be covering later. But that will then register the devices in your organization, after which you can configure an autopilot-specific profile, assign the profile to those devices, and then you're ready to go. So that's just kind of a basic overview. What I'm going to be showing next is the kind of a live demo using a production tenant, and walk through really how an IT admin would go about creating the profile and deploying it to devices. So I just changed the screens here. So here I'm showing just the basic dashboard for the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. This is kind of the successor to Intune MDM, and it's not only used for autopilot deployments, but also kind of management overall for your Azure AD or hybrid Azure AD joined devices. You can do things such as app installation or deployment, security, etc. So I'm not really going to be going into too much detail on the other uses, but we're going to kind of start with autopilot here. So in order to go to the autopilot specific settings, you would need to navigate to devices. You go to Windows Platform, and then you would go into Windows Enrollment. And here, I'm going to blow this up for those of you that can't see it. Here you can see essentially all the ways you would enroll a device. And this section is not only for autopilot, but also existing devices that you would want to enroll into the management in your tenant. So the part we're going to focus on here is the bottom with autopilot. I may or may not have mentioned before, but using a connector, you can hybrid Azure AD join autopilot devices, but we're really just going to be talking about pure Azure AD devices today. We're going to start here with the Devices tab. And this is essentially where you would import devices that you've either harvested the IDs from yourself or been given from your whatever OEM vendor that you are purchasing devices from. And that file you would import. The type of file is a CSV file, and I can show you here kind of what it would look like if you were given a file from another from a vendor, or if you harvested it yourself. So as you can see here, the pertinent information which gets recorded and put into this file is the device serial number, the Windows product ID, and the hardware hash on the device. And this file only shows one device being harvested here, but you could have rows and rows and rows of devices, 10, hundreds, or thousands in that range, and all in the one file. And once you are ready with that, you can go ahead and upload it from here. Once the file has been uploaded, you will see the devices here listed by their serial number. A little bit more information, manufacturer, model, that kind of thing is shown here if you are not really sure, what kind of device you're uploading, or if you wanted to get a little bit more information about the device. So once you've done that, the next part would be for you to create an actual profile in Autopilot. So moving back, we can see here that you can create a profile. We have a bunch of profiles here, but today we're going to be really going over the profile I have pre-created. The create profile option is very similar to the edit option, so you're not going to be missing out much when we go ahead and check this out. So in properties here, you'll kind of see the things you will set up while creating an Autopilot profile. Quick things in the front, putting a name, description, and the target for your devices for this profile. But the main thing I really want to talk about here is the changes you can make to the out-of-box experience. As Priya kind of mentioned before, but I kind of want to touch on here, you can choose a deployment mode for the Autopilot profile. Pre-1903, essentially, every Autopilot deployment is user-driven. For those of you who have created profiles in the past, this actually wasn't even an option until recently, and everything was essentially classified as user-driven because the user would be the one signing onto the device and configuring it as their own. But now that you have the option of self-deploying, you can choose for a device to be generic, not associated with a single user, more of a kiosk or shared device. The next thing you can see here is what kind of AD you're joining, what kind of infrastructure. Of course, we're going to keep as Azure AD, but if you do have a hybrid setup, you can choose to automatically have them hybrid Azure AD joined. There are a few extra requirements with that. but that's something we can leave for another time. So there are not that many things to set up in a profile, but some of the things that you may be familiar with when setting up a personal device are things like software licensing terms, privacy settings, language, region settings, and like configuring a keyboard. Those kinds of things you can actually set up to automatically configure. And one of the things that may be important for you in your organization is to not have users accept licensing terms on your behalf. So kind of hiding that is very important. And even things like privacy settings, that's kind of mandated by whatever compliance policies you have in place. So users being able to configure that on their own, probably not a good idea as well. Basic things like language, region, and keyboard configuration, you can leave for the user to decide if they really want to configure extra keyboards. But one of the cool things about language is, let's say you have multiple regions, for your organization, and you're trying to autopilot devices not only in the region you were in, but also other areas. You can go ahead and actually choose to set the language as operating system default. So wherever you are getting your device, let's say it's a Europe or Asia or South America, wherever it is, you can have the device setup keep that language region automatically. The last two things I want to mention here are white glove. For those of you who are not familiar, white glove is essentially another way for you to pre-configure a device from the admin side, because you may want to preload some of these automatic applications or policies before you hand it off to the user. An IT admin can go ahead and run the out-of-box experience as themselves and still be assured that when the user gets it, they will still be able to do the out-of-box experience themselves, but with some things already done for them. So it's a little bit more hands-on if you need that option. The last thing here is the device naming template. I have it turned on here just so I can show you, kind of some of the features for that. Just, unique name with serial number or even a random generated number if you need to. But I'm sure many of you already have custom scripts or, whatever naming conventions that are a little bit more complex than what's available here. So if you want to turn that off and push out through a provisioning package after the fact, that's also possible. I'm going to go ahead and review and save that. And the last thing I wanted to mention here is essentially the assignment of devices. So when you create this profile, it's just created there as its own standalone thing. You're going to want to associate this profile with a device. And there are a few ways to do that. The first way, and probably the most automated way that you're going to be choosing to do so, is by group. What you can do is actually within the same portal. My bad, forgetting the word here. Within the same portal, you can create a group to encompass all of those newly imported devices. So what you may also be thinking is, hey, I imported these devices as serial numbers. They're not actually part of my organization yet, so, how am I supposed to manage them? So one of the nice things here is within this portal, when you add a device through that CSV file, and it's, just a bare device, it will still show up to be included inside a group. So you can create a group and assign those devices by serial number into the group. But, again, you could say, hey, I don't really want to assign, 1,000 devices manually to my group. How do I go about doing that? So one of the cool things is the ability for these groups to have dynamic enrollment to the group or additions. So, and this is something that you can reference through documentation as well. You can create a tag called the ZTDID, and using that tag in the group, you can dynamically allocate all of the devices that are being imported through this portal into that group. So now that all your groups all your devices are automatically joined to that group, and that group is associated with this profile here, I can go ahead and select a group here so you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and select this group here. Read and save. And now that group is, oh, sorry, I already did it. That's why it's giving me an issue here. But I had already done it. So, once that's already assigned, you can go ahead and now actually do the autopilot for devices. So what I'm going to show you next is how it would look from the user perspective. I have actually deployed a device using this profile itself that you see here, and I recorded the video yesterday just so that we can get through it quicker. The experience is essentially exactly the same, but I have sped it up so that we can see the important parts. So I'm going to go ahead and play that, and you can see here. So once the device boots up, it's going to start automatically trying to go into the out-of-box experience. And for those of you who are familiar, it starts up asking, hey, what language, what region, and all the EULA stuff that I mentioned earlier. But because we have turned that off, it kind of skips all of that. So the user doesn't even have to deal with it. But again, you're also seeing that there's a lot of setting up and being done behind the scenes. And what's going on right now is it's not only pulling down the profile of assigned to this device, it is also pulling down things like Windows updates that it may need to keep in compliance with this tenant or your organization's compliance policies. So as you can see here, I think it found a Windows update, so it would need to restart. So that's one of the interesting things is, I didn't really put any of that information in to the autopilot profile that I created. It's kind of pulling those policies down on its own and applying them to the device. So once it restarts here and then goes into setup, you'll see that, again, it showed up with this screen here that I did not set up either. This is your corporate branding, so your user knows that, hey, this is actually a device within my organization, not some random device that I'm signing into. And that, branding that you put up is very helpful there. Being that this is a device managed through our organization as well, we have some policies in place to help secure our accounts. And that one thing being the Microsoft Authenticator, so at this point I'm, kind of seeing that on my phone I'm getting a notification to confirm that it is me that just signed into this account. So policies like that are automatically being pulled down and being applied to the device. So once all of this is kind of complete, it goes into the next part, which is actually setting up the device. And all of these settings are kind of things that you set up beforehand for your organization and in your tenant, but these are for already running devices. A lot of the times you're kind of doing double work in setting up the same policies that you would for your environment, and also when you're creating an image or setting up newly image devices, you're kind of trying to do double the work with the autopilot and kind of how it is leveraging the Microsoft MDM or MEM now settings. You can kind of shorten that time and leverage your already done work. So as you can see here, it's kind of going through the setup process. I'm going to kind of pause it here so you can see, but things that are being automatically pulled down that I'm not even setting up myself, like security policies, certificates, applications. It's very, very cool to see how much integration is going on here, behind the scenes. And this device setup portion is really a nice way for your user to either see or let happen while they're off doing something else, what's going on and how ready the device is for them to use. And the other reason I paused here is so that you can see that once it's done that first setup, these next two things can kind of happen in the background. So your user can go ahead and hit the Continue Anyway button, get into Windows, and start working immediately while the rest of the setup is still going on. So, I'm gonna play the rest of this, but it's essentially just showing how the device is being set up. And once this portion, gets to a certain point, you're kind of sure that your device is fully managed by your organization. I'm actually going to show you guys how this device looks now after the fact. So let's go ahead and transition to that. Here we go. So this is the exact same device which I set up there. This was done a couple days ago, so that's why it's just sitting here ready. But I really wanted to emphasize a couple things here on the device, which you may or may not have been aware of while that video was playing or I was showing kind of the things in the background. One of the biggest things here is actually that the device changed versions that it was on. So when I started the autopilot process on this device, it was a 1809 device. But during the time where I autopiloted it and it finished setting up and applying all the updates, it actually updated itself to 1903, which, again, I did not specify in the autopilot profile, but because there are compliance policies in this tenant, it's slowly adding on the updates and feature updates that are the minimum for the organization. The next thing I wanted to emphasize is kind of maybe not for the end user, but more for your IT admin to see the actual policies on the device. You can actually check by going through settings and checking the school or work access, is you can see that the connection to Azure AD is there. And one of the coolest things here is when you click Info, you can actually see some of the exact policies that have been applied to the device. Now, again, this is not something that your user would necessarily be interested in, but it's another way to kind of assure your IT admins that things are actually being applied, and this autopilot deployment is not just a vanilla deployment of the device. It's actually essentially fully deployed, similar to an actual image device. So this may be a kind of high-level overview, but if you want a real deep dive, you can go ahead and check this option at the bottom, which is the Advanced Diagnostic Report. So this will actually create a report, and I'm going to do it here. It'll create a report to show you the exact specifics of every single thing applied to this device. So I'm going to navigate through here. If you don't remember the locations, it's something that is actually showed up when you click the button, so you can see the full location there. But it generates this HTML report, which you can then click on. And I'm going to show you a quick overview of it, not the entire thing. But this report here shows you every single thing configured on the device. Obviously, you have the name of the device, which was set up by .profile, just the basic name, initial portion plus the addition of the serial number here. Pick that up properly. And then the OS build, which I know this is a little bit gibberish, but this does translate to 1903. And then if I scroll down, and I'm going to do this really, quickly here, and it shows every single setting and every single flag that has been set. This is a lot of, again, gibberish for many of us here, but if I scroll down all the way down to here, you can actually see the exact, policies that were maybe not set, and you're like, oh, hold on, I thought I set this value to 0 or something. I don't really want them to use game DVR, so I should probably check that and turn that off. But this level of granularity is something that's very useful for your IT admins, and it's, even though it's not necessarily a very specific feature to autopilot, it is one of the things that allows you to see, okay, I autopiloted the device. Is everything actually coming down properly? I want to be sure. So very useful for your IT admins. So that's kind of it for what I'm showing on the device side. I'm going to go back to the portal here to show you one last thing here, and that is the management of the device itself. So once the device was deployed, it will show up properly in the management side here. And one of the coolest features that I think is added now is all these all these things you can do at the top. And it's kind of hiding one of them as well that I wanted to show. But, biggest thing here being autopilot reset. So, sometimes when devices are out in the field, you're you kind of don't have the same flexibility that you do with a device on-prem, right? You can't just walk up to the device and, hey, say, I'm going to manually restart you because I need you to get these policies or whatever. The coolest thing being that you can do that remotely from here. You can force the restart of the device. You can forcefully wipe a device, and then you can do what's called an autopilot reset. And what the autopilot reset here does is it actually allows you to it's not really a full wipe, it just removes the user-specific settings on the device. And that's very useful because let's say you're giving your device to your employees, but the wrong device went to the wrong person and they signed in and they set it up as themselves. Well, you don't want to just wipe that device and redeploy it for the other user. You still want all those corporate policies, corporate installed applications, and security settings still there, but you want somebody else to be the owner of the device here. So that's where autopilot reset allows you to wipe all of the user-specific information off a device the next time they sign out. The other interesting thing here is this wipe option, and the only reason I bring this up is, let's say you autopiloted a device that has the wrong profile. So let's say it has the wrong profile settings, and you're like, well, shoot, I kind of need to reset this and start over. The wipe button actually will wipe everything and bring the device back to the out-of-box settings, so you can redeploy the device. So that's one very interesting thing here. Just to note, this wipe will happen at the next restart. So if you want to force that to happen immediately, you can just force the restart through the restart button. So kind of some ways you can manage a device remotely, again, not being able to see the device. So that's pretty much what I had for the demo side here. The last thing I wanted to get to was kind of the prerequisites for being able to do all this. Let's see here. Okay. So I don't want to go through every single prereq here, but just as an overview, of course, you need to make sure you're using a supported version of Windows 10. A lot of these things are probably very familiar to you. When using Azure AD or hybrid or whatever your tenant looks like, a lot of these are kind of the basic requirements for using Azure AD themselves. But the two things I want to mention here are the last two, which is automatic enrollment and custom branding. So as you saw, the device that I autopiloted, obviously started as a basic device that had no settings on it, but in the end was fully enrolled and managed by the tenant itself. That does require automatic enrollment because during the setup phase, it does need to enroll the device in the management side to be able to manage the device. One thing I didn't mention here is actually during that enrollment phase, let's say you actually are managing devices through some other third-party or on-prem solution, you can include that as part of your deployment process, so that once the device is deployed, the SCCM or Altruist, whatever your management solution is, those policies also get applied. And then the last thing being the custom branding, which you saw when I signed into the device during the out-of-box experience. That is a separate setting that you would need to configure to, make the user sure that it is your device. And that's all I had. If we have any more questions, I can throw it back to Daryl and Priya here. But thank you, everyone.
Incredibly informative. If anybody does have any questions, please feel free to jump into the chat box there and ask away. We appreciate all of you joining us. Again, saw some familiar names out there in the chat window, so glad you were able to jump in here. Also wanted to thank Jared and his team from the SMDP program at Microsoft. We are a Surface reseller, so some of you are existing customers. We may not have conveyed that, but should you need Surface devices, we can definitely help you there. And I wanted to thank Priya as well for kicking things off. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jared to close out here. And thanks again for joining.
Absolutely, and thank you, Daryl. Appreciate it. And of course, thanks to Rigel and Priya for walking through a good amount of information on Windows Autopilot. That's kind of just the beginning, learning what is the basics, how to go through it. And if a lot of that seemed like something you wanted to work with a partner in order to accomplish, that's exactly what the folks at NAPCorp are here to do, to help you get set up with a modern deployment solution. So thank you so much for walking us through that. And thanks to all of you for joining us. I want to take a moment to answer your question.